yourself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good morning and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's a live show. I had a few pre-records this week due to friendlies, etc. But big welcome to Mick who joins me to talk for an hour about Newcastle United. And Mick, 25 years ago, mate, where were you?
25 years ago yesterday, I'll tell you exactly where I was. I was in the pouring rain, hanging around the Gallagher, along with 20,000 others, looking at a stage that I thought I'd never see, and then going into the stadium where they created this, the breweries created this fantastic stage. I mean, everybody will have seen pictures of it, and onto the stage walked, Sir John, Freddie Fletcher, and KK, and then AS. And lo and behold, the world record signing belonged to Newcastle United. They'd broken the bank. They'd found 15 million by hook or by crook. Alistair Wilson at the breweries had played a huge part in it. And they found the money. They persuaded him to neglect and turn his back on Manchester United and join his boyhood team. And, we thought that day, and we all believed genuinely in our hearts that this was going to be the start. This was going to be the start of big things. And as I said on social media this morning, 25 years on, where are we? Where are we really? We were on the crest of a huge wave 25 years ago yesterday. And where are we now? The waves are barely lapping against the shore. It's a sorry state of affairs for what is essentially, Steve, the same football club. It's just the personnel that have changed, and the mentality about the club, and of course, most of all, the owner. You break down those 25 years, Steve, into almost down the middle, between 96 and 2007, 9 of 11 seasons in Europe, FA Cup finals, world record signings. In the last 14 years, 1 season in Europe, 2 relegations, and the ownership of a man who does not give a flying hoot about Newcastle United. And as a result, we are where we are. It's been a strange old 25 years. Nobody has any divine right, Steve. Let's just say that to succeed in football, and nobody has a divine right to think that they should always be as good as they once were. But when the mitigating circumstances and the individual involved is as powerful and as meaningless as the owner is at Newcastle, it doesn't half make you think.
Yeah, Tom Lynch remembers hearing the news on CFAX. That tells you how long ago that particular signing was. I was there. I remember it. I mean, it was all very hush hush. Mick, you and I both have good contacts at the football club, and I'm sure you got to hear slightly before me. But it was still a great surprise to hear that the England captain, one of the best goal scorers in the Premier League, was coming home. And as you say, just the whole theatre of it. I was lucky enough to be in the stand to see the press conference. I was also, down round the back of the Leazes end to see him brought out onto the stage by Alan Robson, that infamous video that gets played time and time again from years gone by. But yeah, I mean, it's so depressing, really. And this last probably couple of weeks where I think even the most optimistic about the takeover, i.e. me, has really now just, almost given up the ghost, because the news, I guess, which we could talk about first was, first of all, we hear that arbitration isn't going to take place until 2022, which doesn't just wipe out this transfer window, but probably January's as well. We then have Keith Patterson, who has been a godsend on this show for information about what a CAC case means, why he said that was what was going to win us this takeover. We then basically hear this week that, that the CAC case hearing for jurisdiction, so that's not even the CAC case, won't be heard now until the 27th of September, which of course writes off the August transfer window. But the possibility of a CAC case might not even be heard, depending on what this committee feel. it just had me deflated on the way down to Rotherham on Tuesday, and I just felt that was it. And spoken to, I've heard from both sides. We've got contacts on both sides, as we keep saying on the show, and I just can't see a resolve. So for me, it's time to move on. It's time to concentrate on the football. The fans are angry. And I can say from being at ringside, essentially at these games over the last couple of nights, especially, the anger has turned again to Ashley. The anger is back on.
Steve, and so it should. This is the major point that should be made, and that's the point I was making in the roundabout way. Yeah. By introducing the fact that it's 25 years since Shearer and splitting that 25 years down the middle. One is BC and one is AD. The problem is BC doesn't mean before Ashley and AD doesn't mean after Ashley, because he's still there. But what was happening before and what was happening since his arrival is as plain as day, is chalk and cheese. And as a result, people need to get their head around the fact that there is one person and one person only responsible for this situation, and it's the owner. And you can scream and bawl about the players, you can scream and bawl about Steve Bruce, but I'm afraid there is one man and one man only responsible for this whole predicament, for this whole mess that this football club is in, and it's the owner. And I think that's why everybody got a little bit excited about the takeover, because suddenly you see light at the end of the tunnel with regard to life without Mike Ashley. But I couldn't help myself, Steve. I know you were closer to it than me, and I'm not in the Northeast anymore. But I couldn't resist posting. I'm not sure I ever believed anybody involved in this whole bloody takeover. You really don't know who to believe, because there are some parties you don't know. There are some parties you know a little bit more. There are some parties you know very well and don't trust them. So where do where does the blame lie, if you want to apportion blame, or was it just one big game? Was it one big scam that, again, Ashley has orchestrated in order to take people's eye off the ball of the fact that he's gone another 2 years without investing in the football club, and he's now manufactured a situation where he probably won't have to invest in the football club for another 18 months in terms of transfers, because this thing is just sitting on the shelf.
That is it. I mean, for me, it is like putting a jigsaw together, and I agree with you in that respect. That, look, and I had this conversation with a few fans who I bumped into last night, that ultimately the only person who wins from this situation is Mike Ashley, and
100%.
I got to be honest, because I know the PCP side of the equation, I believe them, and they've lost money on this. They've put not the last 15 months into this. They've been trying this since 2017. And let's not remember, they've put in £17 million into Mike Ashley's bank account, essentially to get into the data room, and it was non-returnable. Now, they are culpable for that. That is their money. And Mike Ashley essentially now can run a CAC case, which in all respects, the CAC case will only work out in Mike Ashley's favour. He will get compensation if this doesn't go through, unless, it's all about disclosure, but essentially he gets compensation. He's at the roulette table, which is what Steve Hasty said the other night, basically playing with somebody else's money.
Yeah.
Again, and let's just say, just for the figures, let's just say Nick DeMarco and all the other lawyers, let's just say they take £1 million wages for everything they've done over the last 15 months or whatever it is they've been involved. That still leaves Mike Ashley £16 million up from a takeover, which he hasn't done. He hasn't had to spend any money on any players. Steve Bruce got him a 12th place finish last year, so he's done all right with a league. And like you say, we're entering another transfer window, which is rapidly approaching its end again, and he won't have spent any more money. And he's still in the Premier League. And if it looks as if we're struggling or down at the bottom again come January, he'll loosen the purse strings a little bit and invest if he's still here. He's done a deal for a new for a new club strip. He's offloaded the shop at the ground. So Castore's coming and taking that. So I presume the club's getting rent. It's win-win-win. Mike Ashley, once again, I'm sure the Bee Gees wrote that song about him. You win again, because it literally is Mike Ashley's. Mike Ashley can't lose.
Yeah, but why don't we learn from this, Steve? Why? Pete. Why? I just don't understand why more concerted pressure can't be put on Mike Ashley in terms of demonstrations.
So how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we do it?
I've said this for as long as he's been at the football club, 14 years, that, in the same way that other clubs somehow manage to constructively demonstrate against an owner. Gillette and Hicks were the prime examples at Liverpool. Manchester United occasionally flirt with the Glazers. But there must be a means, and there must be a way other than just singing songs, derogatory songs about him. And the other thing I don't understand is, the Steve Bruce situation. In an ideal world, maybe Steve Bruce wouldn't be the manager of Newcastle United. But we're so far away from an ideal world, it's untrue. So in the meantime, if you think to yourself, and this is my logic, I don't know whether people think this is crazy or whether people think this is the wrong sort of logic. But I think if this football club's going to be bought, and if this football club is going to be rid of Mike Ashley, you have to make it a viable proposition. You have to make it an attractive proposition for someone to buy. Now, first and foremost, that means keeping it in the Premier League and keeping it as healthy as is eternally possible in the Premier League. And the only way to do that is to back the manager and back the players and try and get the team up the division, try and get them healthier, try and get them more attractive. And then somebody might come in and say, I'll have it. Because at the minute, if we're undermining the players, if we're undermining Steve Bruce, and there's a threat, and there is even now, you can bet your life, in 2 weeks' time, if there's been no transfer activity, Newcastle will be one of the 2, 3, 4, 5 favourites for relegation. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The bookies will make them sort of there or thereabouts favourites for relegation. The last thing on earth we want is relegation, because again, you've got no chance of selling a championship football club, and especially not for £300 million. I mean, it's overpriced as it is. So I just don't understand, the negativity towards Bruce at the level that it's at. The negativity, the vitriol, and the concrete attempt to get rid of the owner should be our first priority.
The problem is, Mick, that the fans are divided, and I did a piece on this the other week about why I believe that the fans are divided at Newcastle. That's something which, of course, suits Mike Ashley's
absolutely
ownership, because exactly, and that is a big issue. But we know season tickets are dropping. We know that was 10,000 people prior to COVID. We had somebody who went systematically around the club's website and counted the tickets that are still available, and he worked out 13,000 probably won't be there this season as season ticket holders. That doesn't mean that people won't pay match per match. I said that I still expect the big games, your Liverpools, your Man Uniteds, your Man Cities will still have nigh on full houses. But I was speaking to Fez, one of the he used to play for Newcastle, but he runs the buses down to the games, the away games, and he was saying to me he expects maybe 42 to 45,000 on average for games this season. Would you agree that maybe he's not signing up for season tickets is the way forward? People to stop going to games. It's something which you never thought you would hear Newcastle fans say or do, but is that the only way you can drive an owner out?
Well, as I say, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? If we undermine the chances of the football team winning, if we undermine or weaken the possibility of the football club winning, then we make Newcastle United weaker. We make it as a product weaker. We make it as a football club poorer. We make it as as the club we love a lesser proposition. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do. All I'm trying to say is that and I don't know whether there's been a genuine attempt to do it before now, but people should put their heads together and come up with a way of somehow demonstrating to a degree where it doesn't harm the team, it doesn't harm the footballing side of things, but it does make him uncomfortable. But the problem is, I don't think anything will make him uncomfortable. And also, going back to what you've just said, I don't think it's just Newcastle United where there's a malaise in football. I think there's, COVID has made everybody rethink a little bit. The whole, going to the match system, will that ever return? Will the whole going to the match experience ever be in the same form as it was pre-COVID? We don't know that. And also, as I say, I just think people are getting a bit sick and tired of football and everything that comes with football in terms of, stunts like the ESL, just the fact that there's so much money running around in football, and yet everybody else is scrimping and saving in the like of COVID. So, I'm not too sure that Newcastle are the only club in the country who are struggling to come to terms with a new season. It'll be interesting to see what crowds are like up and down the country. But I just know that, as ever, the rest of the country is looking at Newcastle and thinking, here comes the circus. There's the sideshow once again. And I just wish, for once and all, we could turn our frustration into something a bit more concrete to try and get rid of this owner. Because as long as he's there, it's never going to change. The manager's never going to change. People are getting excited and jumping up and down about Steve Bruce getting a new contract. Will he get a contract? Won't he get a contract? Well, there's every chance he'll get a contract because he's the perfect manager for Mike Ashley. But it's not his fault. It's not his fault. He's just a guy trying to make a living, And also, I just thought another thing since we last spoke, with regard to Steve Bruce and where the problem is with Steve Bruce in terms of supporters, and does it come down to the Sunderland Newcastle bit? It
does, I think.
Yeah, but you've now got somebody who was, the most respected manager at Newcastle since Sir Bobby, since Kevin, etc. Rafael Benitez has now done exactly the same that Steve Bruce has done in the Northeast on Merseyside. He's gone from managing Liverpool to managing Everton. Now, do the same rules not apply to Rafael Benitez as applies to Steve Bruce in terms of you should never go and work for the enemy? You should never turn your back on your first love. And also, don't forget, whatever Steve Bruce may or may not have said, I haven't heard too many reports about what he may have said about Newcastle when he joined Sunderland. But, Rafa Benitez very definitely was disrespectful to Everton in one or two things he said when he was manager of Liverpool. And yet a different set of rules seem to apply to Rafa.
Yeah, I remember when Bruce went to Sunderland, and Steve Bruce doesn't write the headlines, but what he says, and we've learned this as a Newcastle manager, he's not the greatest in front of the media. No. And it was just, I never wanted to manage Newcastle United. That was it. And that is always going to get thrown back in your face.
But he never referred to Newcastle United as a little club. Which is what allegedly Rafa did about Everton.
I find it really strange that Rafa's gone there, and of course the James Rodriguez situation,
Steve, nothing should surprise you.
You're right.
Last time I was on.
You're right.
Surprise you.
The Rodriguez situation at Everton now is now going to be at Rafa's first test, because he clearly wanted to leave before Rafa arrived. Now he's got to deal with that as the manager, and the fans are up in arms because he's one of the fans' favourites. Yeah. So that's going to run and run. But yeah, look, plenty of questions coming in as always, Mick, and you touched on that already. Do you think there's any truth in Bruce getting a new deal? Bruce answered this last night. He said no. He certainly hasn't been offered a new deal. He's from his perspective, it's news to him. However, he was asked if his contract came to an end at the end of the season, and it doesn't. So it's quite clearly a rolling contract, Mick, I would imagine.
Absolutely, and that is something that Ashley's always been keen on. He plays by his own rules. He deals with people in a very different way, to most CEOs or most owners of football clubs, and he likes rolling contracts, and he doesn't particularly like the rigidity of set contracts, etc., etc. So, when, Steve Bruce is asked, isn't your contract up at the end of 2022 because you signed a 3-year deal in 2019? No, it's not. Well, that didn't surprise me in the slightest. In the same way that it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that a new contract's talked about, because, again, going back to the animal that is Mike Ashley, and if we don't know this animal by now, Steve, we want shooting. We want shooting. We should, we should know him inside out. Steve Bruce is the perfect manager for Mike Ashley, because he doesn't rock the boat. He keeps them in the Premier League, or as it stands, is keeping them in the Premier League. Has got them a 12th place finish, which in terms of money was an awful lot healthier than it was looking 6 weeks before the end of the season. So there's nothing that Steve Bruce hasn't done, to my mind, that does anything but lend himself to getting a new contract off Mike Ashley. So it would surprise me more if he didn't get a new contract, to be honest with you. But again, whether that's right or wrong is for debate. But as I've said before, I don't come on to defend Steve Bruce, but I don't understand a lot of the vitriol towards him, because he isn't the problem. And at this minute in time, who do people expect is going to come and manage Newcastle United? Who do people expect is going to turn up and take the reins at Newcastle United, either as somebody who wants the job or somebody who Mike Ashley is prepared to employ? For me, he is just another one of the 6 or 7 Ashley-type managers who we've had since 2007.
I've got to be honest. I mean, last night I was slap bang in the middle behind the goal, and it was ironic. At one stage, I would say that this side basically started singing like an anti-Bruce song, and then this side started singing "Brucey, Brucey, give us a wave." So It's not all hatred towards Steve Bruce yet.
No.
However, when the season kicks off, that's when people will start to judge him, and of course, Graham Jones was back last night. There was certainly a little bit more flavour and a little bit more imagination to corners and free kicks. I'm not sure Steve Bruce works on them a great deal on the training ground. Graham Jones, as we know, does. Look, Mick, from the pre-season, I will say I'll take a lot of positives out of some of the displays by Jacob Murphy. He looked good at the back end of the season. I thought he looked great in pre-season, and I know that the opposition has all been lower league, but that little bit extra training he's done, he looks firing on all cylinders. He's one to watch. Lewis has looked better in the pre-season, I think. My concern is around the midfield again. Obviously, we don't have Willock, but we have Hendrick, who's played every game more or less in central midfield, clearly because Shelby is still injured and not available for selection. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hendrick starts against Norwich and then against West Ham. It's who he partners up with, and goalkeeping situation as well is a concern with Dubravka injured. I would imagine Woodman's going to get the nod. But it's been an interesting pre-season. I know you don't put too much into it, but I've picked up and watched a few things. Joe Linton, and of course you'll get fans saying he's found his level, but he looked okay again last night against a lower league team. But we are struggling up front, and I was a bit. I'll ask you this one, Mick. Steve Bruce on Tuesday night said we're okay up front. We've got Callum Wilson and we've got Dwight Gale. But he also said we've got 5 forwards, and he listed Joe Linton, Almiron, and ASM. Would you agree we've got 5 forwards?
Not in the strictest sense, no, absolutely not in the strictest sense. If the criteria for a centre forward is somebody who regularly puts the ball into the back of the net, we have got one centre forward. One centre forward we can rely on. Joe Linton is not a centre forward you can rely on. Alan Saint-Maximin isn't a centre forward, full stop. Almiron isn't a centre forward, full stop. Dwight Gale has proven year in, year out that he's a very good centre forward at championship level, but isn't a Premier League centre forward. So no, Andy Carroll's left the football club. There is no Andy Carroll. There isn't the strike power there. There aren't the centre forwards. And going back to pre-season, Steve, with all due respect, I did 25 pre-seasons with Newcastle United, and I gave up very early on believing anything I saw or I believed in pre-season. I mean, we used to joke about Tottenham. Tottenham were always the best exponents of this. They'd win 7 out of 7 pre-season. They'd win anywhere between 7-0 and 14-0. And everyone would say, oh, what a squad Tottenham have got. They'd lose the first game of the season away at Wigan and then draw at home to Crystal Palace on the Tuesday night. It means nothing. It means nothing. And again, all due respect, going back to Lewis, to Hendrick, to Joe Linton, all of those ones, you've seen the game. I haven't seen the games. So again, due respect. If they weren't Premier League players last season, I'm sorry, Steve, they don't morph for me into a Premier League player just because there's been a couple of decent games in pre-season and just because they've had the summer off. a good player is a good player. Yes, you can work with them. Yes, you can tweak them. And I do think the most significant point you made there was Graham Jones. Graham Jones's stature is growing by the minute. And Graham Jones may well prove to be the best signing that Newcastle have made in the last year, because he gives a crutch to Steve Bruce as a coach. He clearly seems to have a relationship with the players. And also as well, and you might not think this is a big point, but you will find, in the same way that players sign for managers and sometimes sign for football clubs and even owners, they also sign for coaches as well. And if the word gets out that Graham Jones is a good coach, he works well with players, he's got good ideas. If you're a player, for instance, argument's sake, Joe Willock is a young Englishman who I don't think will come back to Newcastle United. But if, for instance, you were a Joe Willock or another, the thought of working with Graham Jones would be a pull, would be an attraction. So I think, going back to all those points you made about pre-season, the return of Graham Jones for me is possibly and probably the most important one, and certainly the one to take the most pluses out of.
I hope you've dusted your crystal ball off for Peter Robson's question. He says, when does Mick think that realistically things will turn around for the better at the club?
When he leaves. Simple as. When Mike Ashley leaves the football club. I've just done it there, Steve. 25 years since Shearer signed yesterday. The first 11 years, 9 seasons in Europe. We were in Europe 9 seasons out of 11. We got to cup finals. Yeah, all right. It was a different world, but it was a world without Ashley. It's too scary, the stats. It's too stark, the reality between pre-Ashley and post-Ashley. 14 years since, relegations, not a sniff of a trophy, 1 season in Europe, courtesy of a 5th place finish under Pardew, and the club, going to not rack and ruin, but in terms of stature, just dwindling. The key moment and the crux moment will come at this football club when Mike Ashley leaves.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Darren Cowan says, morning Steve and Mick, is this the worst start to a season we've ever seen? I think I've seen worse, Mick.
Absolutely. It's all relative, Steve. It's all relative. It depends what your expectations are. It depends where you think Newcastle should be. Let's be honest with you. Would we, sitting here now, take a mid-table finish in the Premier League? Of course we would. There's a big football team just down the road who are going to be playing League One football again next season. And who not so very long ago, and certainly within the 25 years I'm talking about, were on a par with Newcastle United. It can very easily change. It can very easily turn around and bite you, football club. So if you wake up in the morning in a black and white striped shirt thinking, God, this is the end of the world, this is doom and gloom, our football club's a mess, our football club's a shambles, you could wake up wearing a red and white striped shirt. And I say that with all due respect to Sunderland fans, because I don't particularly like what they've gone through because of mismanagement, etc., etc. And the fact that, once upon a time they had, Alan Johnson on one wing, Mike Summerby, Nicky Summerby on the other wing. They had Quinn and Phillips up front. They were a decent side. They were a club going places. Peter Reid as a manager, etc., etc. Look where they are now. And that's where, genuinely, Steve, that's where Newcastle could very easily be if they're not careful. So, be careful what you wish for, as they say.
Yeah, Blue Moon Boy says, hi Mick, you were a big part of my childhood. My first season was 2002, 2003. Dad got me a radio and I listened to you every week from then on. Any standout memories from the 02-03 season, he says?
Oh, if only I could remember the 02-03 season. To be honest,
was that Bobby?
02-03 was close to Bobby came in 99, didn't he? So it would have been, yeah. And it was around about the Champions League run, wasn't it? So yeah, it would have been Bobby. So again, going back to what your expectations were, and that's a side with Shearer. That's a side with speed. That's a side with Solano. That's That's a star-studded side. But even then, don't forget, Steve. I think Bobby's first season, wasn't it 13th or 14th or 12th or 13th? And I remember telling him that he finished a place above Rude, and that had got Hull at the sack. The fact that he finished as low as he did, and Bobby was delighted to finish, mid-table. So Steve Bruce has finished in a very similar position last season and the season before, and he's getting absolute pelters. So there's not a lot of logic, there's not a lot of rhyme and reason behind this. It's just about what your expectations are, what your mentality is. And again, going back to the point that I keep making without wanting to sound like a scratched record in terms of BC and AD, 2002, 2003 was in a land before Ashley. It was in a world before Ashley. We were oblivious to what was round the corner. We had, heartfelt owners. We had heartfelt managers. We had people who cared about the club. Now we have nothing of the sort.
We had that wonderful Champions League run, actually, that
absolutely.
season, Mick.
Exactly.
Which culminated in the 3-2 injury time winner by Craig Bellamy at Feyenoord.
In Feyenoord, yeah.
Which is probably one of those European trips that Newcastle fans best remember. It's definitely an I was there moment kind of thing, I think, for people. Yeah. So great stuff. Nice to look back on stuff like that. Zayad, good afternoon. Sorry, he says, I fear for this team this season. We got lucky last season. If we don't get 3 or 4 new signings, we'll be in the bottom 3 come December. And Joe Walker, our Toon tipster, said we're 6 favourites to go down at the minute, Mick, 11-4.
6. Yeah, as I say, we'll certainly be in and about it. But, and don't forget, that's probably at this minute in time. If in 2 weeks' time the squad's not been added to, there looks as if there's going to be no activity in the transfer market. If they were to lose a couple, particularly St. Maximin, or another, obviously that would change the bookies' odds. Obviously, the ones that Brentford are going to probably be, I would have thought, absolutely nailed on, favourites for relegation, and the promoted sides invariably are. But we'll be there or thereabouts in terms of what the bookies think. You just don't know. You don't know. And as I say, there's no point reading anything into pre-season. What you should look at is, as you say, the level of investment, whether we do sign players, whether we keep players, what the squad looks like. Because if the squad is kept, to pretty much the level it was at last year, and maybe with 1 or 2 additions, then Steve Bruce, I think justifiably, with the addition of Graham Jones, can say to himself, we should at least go as well as we did last season towards the end and try and build on the momentum that there was towards the end. Whether it does or not remains to be seen.
Big shout out to our sponsor, Spider VPN. Google them and you will find them at the top of this Google search list. They can protect your computer, your passwords, everything on there. Google Spider VPN, one of our main sponsors. Also, skipsandbins.com, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay as you go waste collection. Big shout out to the guys there for their sponsorship. qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, continue to show their support. And get well soon, John. I know he's still in hospital with COVID, but hoping to get out at the weekend. And a big shout out to Jab Signature as well for designing all of our flyers. First time visitor to the site, then just hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right hand corner and you can subscribe for free. 7 shows a week and a few extras thrown in to boot. Hit the thumb up to like the video, click share to your social media, and drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. And there is also the matchday bucket still ongoing for the NUFC Fans Food Bank. Just click on nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation to the Fans Food Bank, and you can still enter into the raffle for that one-off watch. Now, the pool night, we are waiting a decision, but I would imagine that is going to get put off now because of John's trip into hospital with COVID. There will be an announcement either on Monday or Tuesday about that, so it will be postponed, not cancelled, but that gives you more time, of course, to enter into the raffle for that watch. And just as we mentioned, Sir Bobby, it's just come up on the Newcastle United Twitter timeline today, of course, that it's 12 years since we lost the great man. Memories of Sir Bobby, Mick, I guess from you. Your favourite memory of Sir Bobby, whether it was an interview or a particular game, is there anything that stands out for you? I'm sure you've got a few.
Oh, he was. I mean, he was an absolutely fascinating character. I mean, if I could just indulge, if you could just indulge me a second. My dad was from a mining village in County Durham called Thornley. My dad is about the same age as Bobby, slightly younger, I think. And when he got to about 18, he decided that he was going to pack his bags and go to London. All his brothers went down the pit, but his mother said, "Look, you're a bit of a bright spark. You need to, you need to see if you can make a different way in the world than your dad did, your granddad did, your brothers have, etc., etc." So he went off to London and he got a job as a clerk, but he got horribly homesick, really, really homesick. And every other weekend, he'd jump on a train and try and get back to the northeast, and then would be persuaded by his family in Thornley in County Durham to go back down to London and try and stick at it. And I always remember when I was a kid, very young, all the superstars of my era were the Georgie Bests, etc. He told me this story. I must have only been 8 or 9. He said there's a fella called Bobby Robson. He was a great player, and he told this story about how he got on a train to go back down to London. Bobby was at Fulham at the time, but likewise, I subsequently found out, was homesick as well, and used to go back to Langley Park, etc. And they ended up in the same carriage, and they started talking, and they were two, northeast lads, two County Durham lads, trying to make their way in London. They got talking. He never really divulged what the conversation about, but I'm sure it was just two northeast lads going to London. So I was very aware of, my mates at school. I used to say, "Oh, my dad was in a train with Bobby Robson." Who that was Bobby Robson? That they had no idea as kids. They wanted to know whether he met Georgie Best or met Rodney Marsh or whatever. So I was very aware of him, and then obviously got to know him during the World Cup in 1990 when he really was in his pomp. And then when he came back to Newcastle in 99, I always remember the famous press conference, which was in what was then the restaurant in the top right-hand corner, the corner of the Leazers and the Milburn. And we all got dragged in there one Saturday morning, actually. Rude had gone the previous day, and Bobby walked in. And I always remember he said he'd been followed by a car, and the reg plate was something like NUFC 1 or something like that. And actually, it was Freddie Shepherd in the car behind him. But Bobby had no idea that he was being followed by anybody from Newcastle. And he said, "How weird is this?" He said, "I've just been followed all the way here. It must be an omen by a car with NUFC on the number plate." And everyone went, "Well, that's because it's Freddie Shepherd's car, But, I remember interviewing him that day. That was probably as pertinent an interview as I did with him, because we went out into the seats in the back of the stand in that corner. We opened the French windows to the Magpie restaurant and sat in the stand, just me and him. And he looked out, and I swear to God, Steve, he was like a kid in a sweet shop. He looked out and he said, "My dad will be the proudest man in the world today if he was with us." He said, because we all said, if you could play for Newcastle United, if the next best thing is if you could manage Newcastle United. And he talked about turning them down when he was at Barcelona, and how it broke his heart not to stay loyal, obviously, because that's a measure of the man, but that he couldn't come back and manage. And he's been given a second chance, and he was just looking out over the park, and he was welling up. And you compare that to what you have, and I'm not just talking about Ashley, and I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about football in general. You don't get those characters anymore. You don't get people who love their club and care for their club, as certainly not in the numbers that you once did. And he was just a fantastic character. And we all know the favourite story was the one in the Metro Centre when he was signing his book, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard. But for those who haven't heard it, Bobby's written his book, and he's sitting at a table. And as you can imagine, this is when Newcastle are Champions League, etc. They're queuing round the block, and Bobby's just sitting there, bless him, and he's signing best wishes, Bobby Robson. To Billy, to Bobby, best wishes, Bobby Robson. Anyway, this goes on for about half an hour, and there's a guy on his shoulder, and just a security guard at the Metro Centre. And Bobby's got his head down, and he turns to this fella and he says, "What's the queue looking like now, son?" And he said, There's hundreds, Bobby. There's hundreds. And he carries on writing. And this kid gets his book signed. And he looks at it and it says, "To Johnny, best wishes, Bobby Hundreds." And the kid took it to the Chronicle, and the back page or the inside back page or the front page of the Chronicle the next day was the inside cover of Bobby's new book, and it said, "To Jimmy, best wishes, Bobby Hundreds."
Brilliant. That is.
I mean the players, but and people used to say, "Oh, it's funny how he used to get names wrong." That fella had an encyclopedic. I defy anybody who's got as many names of as many footballers running around in his head to put them all in the right order at the right time without letting one or two slip. So, so that, so Kieran Dyer is Carl Court or whatever, it was just, the man was a genius. The man, and so lovely and so, but hard with it as well. Or wouldn't suffer fools, but genuinely great guy.
Top stuff. Great stories. Knew you would have a few. Ashley Meikle, he's a good lad. He's a Leeds fan. I've been on Matchday Lives before. He says, can you remember who Shearer scored his first goal against in a Newcastle shirt? It was at home, wasn't it? The free kick at the Leeds' end.
Against Wimbledon.
Wimbledon, yeah.
First game of the season at Wimbledon. I'm trying to think whether he scored in pre-season, because it was such a whirlwind.
He definitely scored in pre-season, I think, didn't he?
He went to Lincoln. Didn't he? Went to Lincoln at very late notice because it put about 2,000 on the crowd. He'd only just signed. He went off to the Far East, and then they had a game at Sinsel Bank arranged against Lincoln. But I'm not sure if he scored or not. I can't. And he didn't have a particularly long pre-season either, Alan, because the negotiations and the talks and the will he, won't he was so protracted. Well, in fact, if we think about it, it was 25 years ago yesterday, Steve, that he signed. So that is 2 weeks away from the start of the season, or a week away from the start of the season. So, and don't forget, he went straight from that to the Far East.
Yeah,
and that was another one of the great stories. If you want to talk about the measure of the man and the money that Newcastle were dealing with, he couldn't get on the plane, if you remember, with the rest of the players, because putting Shearer as a £15 million signing on the plane knocked the insurance budget of the plane over. So that the insurance on the plane wasn't enough with Shearer on it. So they had to take Shearer off the plane, fly him separately, so that the airline were insured if anything terrible happened to the flight. So yeah, it all happened quickly. But no, his first goal was against Wimbledon at the Gallagher free kick.
Yeah, great stuff. And Paul Oxley brings up a subject which I suppose we can move on to, which is he thinks we need a ball playing midfielder in the centre of midfield. The ones we have are all the same. Nobody has anything different in that area. What's your priority? We've heard that Steve Bruce's priority clearly isn't a centre forward. He thinks we've got enough in that area. He says midfield is the priority. Would you agree? And would you try and break the bank, I guess, to get Willock back?
Well, I'm a little bit torn, I have to say, Steve, on Joe Willock, because I'm a great believer in sometimes you genuinely have purple patches. And, I find it hard to get my head around the fact that Arsenal let Joe Willock go on loan to Newcastle. He then does what he does on loan at Newcastle. Whether he could replicate that coming back either on loan or as a signing, I'm not sure. To answer your question in a roundabout way, no, I wouldn't break the bank for him. I'd love to see him back. He did a fantastic job. I think I argued with you that there was a case for him being Player of the Year when you consider what he did in such a short period of time and the number of points they won and the fact that he almost got them safe single-handedly while Wilson was injured. So, absolute hats off to Joe Willock. He'll never do anything wrong in my eyes, and will be forever fondly remembered if he doesn't come back. But I wouldn't break the bank for him. No, I genuinely wouldn't. I don't think he's that big a player and he's that good a player. Now, whether we can get anybody outstanding is highly debatable, Steve. I think when Steve Bruce says, we're all right up front. I think I know what he's saying in a roundabout way, because I think if you're a side who are operating mid Premier League to bottom 5 Premier League, if you've got Callum Wilson fit all the time, then you've got probably as good a centre forward as you could possibly have at that level. If you've got St Maximum chipping in, if you've got Almiron chipping in, if you've got a couple of others who are supply line and are providing a bit of pace, I'm quite happy with that end of the field. Goalkeeping wise, I was pretty happy until what happened in pre-season, but I'm not too sure that Freddie Woodman might not be right to step up. I think sooner or later you're going to have to give Freddie Woodman a go, and I'm not too sure he's a million miles away from being a Premier League player. He's been working hard elsewhere. He's worked well at Swansea for a couple of seasons. There's not a huge difference between Swansea top end of the Championship and Newcastle bottom end of the Premier League. Defensively, I'm not 100% convinced. And then, as you say, in midfield, I like Isaac Hayden, and I think one or two others came to the fore at the tail end of last season. Jacob Murphy in particular, and you've still got the likes of Richie. Couldn't you get a season out of Fraser? Fraser's one that would interest me, Steve. If you could get him fit and firing at the start of the season, he'd be almost like a new signing. So I don't think it's all, going back to what I said earlier, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. And I think we have to be very careful about what we expect and what we don't expect, and what's realistic and what's not realistic, because realism is the key to it.
Oh yeah, Mike Ashley's done a good job of lowering our expectations as a fan base. Over the last 14 years, he's ground us into the ground. Okay, Paul asks, which player do you think in your time watching Newcastle do you wish had more time? He mentions John Dahl Thomason. He says he remembers that in pre-season when he was banging the goals in, you thought he would do a Solskjaer. I think we all did, but of course the injury to Allen at Everton in the pre-season at Goodison probably changed all that and put the pressure on the club and on young Solskjaer, on young John Dahl Thomason at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the major problem that John Dahl Thomason had was that he had a one-on-one from halfway in his first game of the season at St James's, and he blew it, and he never really recovered. But he did go on to be a top player. I mean, he went on to play for AC Milan. I think it's more difficult with young players, Steve. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Oh yeah, I knew he was going to be a player. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. He was a very young man. I mean, if you're asking me about who you would like to have seen longer at the football club, I think probably the outstanding name that springs to mind is Jonathan Woodgate, because if they could have kept Woodgate for 10 years, if you'd had Woodgate at one end and Shearer for a period of time at the other end, then you would have really had the spine of a very good side. But Woodgate came and went very, very quickly, so you would have wanted more of him. Johan Cabaye was a player I really liked, and went too soon, but he went because he saw what was going on around him, and that's the problem we've got with players these days. It's not just about Ashley not releasing the purse strings to buy players and just not being able to afford players. The problem also is that even if we manage to pick up a gem like a Willock or somebody like that, they look around the place, they see the negativity, they see the lack of ambition, and they think, as much as we love the fans and we love playing for these fans, as a career move, it doesn't really make any sense, which is why you fear, for people like St Maximum, etc., who might just think, all the baggage that comes with Newcastle, I don't really want part of it. If it was just down to playing for the fans, I'd do it all day, every day. But the owner, the spite and the venom that is vented at the manager, etc., don't like it, don't want to be part of it. See you later.
Mark would like to know if Sir Bobby ever told you off, Mick.
Very probably, yeah. I mean, I don't remember one. But as I said earlier, he didn't suffer falls. But no, he was. I think, without wanting to state the bleeding obvious, he was a proper footballing man, and when he met proper footballing people who wanted to talk football, he was duly respectful. As I say, I just think he saw a lot of what has crept into the game more and more, i.e. those who are bluffing it, those who are blagging it, those who are bullshitting it, and he didn't like that. And you know, there were characters within the game, a little bit like Kevin back in the day, who I think he saw the writing on the wall for football. So, but no, I don't think there was ever a telling off, so to speak. But you trod very carefully. I mean, and that again is a measure of the man. You didn't just go in and not think about what you were going to ask or what you were going to say. And those who didn't think about what they were going to ask and didn't think about what they were saying soon got short shrift, I'm telling you.
Yeah, definitely. Paul Foster's wanting to know what you think of the new strips, the new away strip, which has gone down quite well. I saw somebody wearing it last night.
Yeah.
They're calling it the Joy Division shirt because it's got the same look as the the album. What do you make of the new strips? Are you a strip kind of guy? I like me retros. I got the old Super Mac on today.
I must admit, I'm a Joy Division sort of guy, and anybody who puts Unknown Pleasures on the front of a football shirt is fine by me. I must admit, I'm interested in that, and I wanted to talk about it last time I was on because I wanted to know whether you knew what the relationship was between Castore and Mike Ashley, because as much as I thought, oh, this is quite a good deal, and they're clearly a company that are going places. I like the design. I love the away strip. I haven't seen much of the first team strip, but increasingly, I tell you who I saw in Castore gear yesterday, a fellow who I really admire, and that's Adam Peaty. So Adam Peaty has been signed up to Castore. They've obviously got Andy Murray. You know, I like Andy Murray. I like what Andy Murray's about. I think he's a winner. So I don't think that. I think that they look outwardly, anyway, to me, to be a firm who are cherry picking and certainly thinking about who they're signing up. And I know people will laugh and say, well, if they're doing Andy Murray and they're doing Adam Peaty, what do they do with Newcastle United? It's about the fans. It's about the fan base. It's about fans who appreciate kit, and it's about fans who buy kit. And if they produce a nice kit, they know that they're going to sell it. The thing that worries me is, and you touched upon it earlier, I started hearing stories that they were in bed with Ashley. Now, whether that means a deal between Castore and Sports Direct in terms of him selling their gear, whether he'd done a deal with them to take over operation of the club shops in the same way that he did with Sports Direct, I don't know, and that would diminish my my thinking on Castore, having thought that they were just. I think there are a couple of lads from Liverpool, if memory serves me, who just came up with the company and they've grown it, and I think they've signed Wolves and they've signed another couple of football clubs. So I think they're going places. I like the kit, but it would worry me and it would disappoint me if, on top of all that and all the nice things I've said about them, they're in bed with you know who.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, it's a move in the right direction. It's one thing the fans don't seem to be grumbling about anyway.
Well, I like it more than Puma. As a kid, I was, we were, if you remember when we were kids, you were either Adidas or Puma, weren't you? And I was always an Adidas boy, and I'm sure you were, judging by the shirt you're wearing. But I think Castore, in terms of the kit, is a step up from Puma. I never really liked the Puma kit, so I like that. So yeah. If I could turn a blind eye to what they might or might not be doing behind the scenes with Ashley, then yeah, maybe it is a step, as you say, in the right direction.
I like the retros. I mean, what I've got on today is the old Buckner retro.
Oh,
it's the Malcolm McDonald.
Yeah,
it's a Super Mac top, but it's actually from
Tops. I thought it was the Adidas. Remember the?
Aye. I like the colour on the new strip, mate. I like the colour on the new strip.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the 4 got a bit of publicity. If you button the shirt right up, it's got the 4 on it. But 4's my lucky number, so I'm definitely going to purchase one. I think at some point. Okay. Obviously we've got one more friendly left, and that's at home to Norwich. I found that a bit bizarre. I know obviously with COVID restrictions, it's probably the reason why. But isn't it a bit strange to be playing a team that you're going to play twice at least in the Premier League, to take them on at home in a pre-season friendly?
Well, there was always that unwritten rule, wasn't there? That we always played the flagship, as it was once known, the flagship friendly, the final friendly, having played away for the majority of the summer, in fact all of the summer, was to play overseas foreign opposition at St James's, and slowly but surely, because of who, and the fact that we just couldn't attract better sides. It went from being, big clubs to Vitesse Arnhem, Borussia Mönchengladbach, etc., etc. But you're right in what you say. Why would you want to play a fellow Premier League team last game of pre-season, and particularly one as well when where you consider, and again, I hate to say it, but you've got to say it. Norwich City are probably going to be in and around us. They're probably going to be much of a muchness. They've proven themselves to be a yo-yo team. But I can remember doing a piece outside of Carrow Road. What was that? 3 years ago, when they beat us first game of the season, or 2 years? No, it must have been 3 years ago now. And they were absolutely head and shoulders better than Newcastle. It must have been 3 years. 2 years ago, wasn't it? 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't understand the logic in it at all. It's obviously just a marriage of convenience, presumably because Steve Bruce has a connection with Norwich. There's probably a little bit of back scratching going on there.
Yeah.
And having said all I've said, to be honest with you, you're not going to give too much away in pre-season, and it's not going to be the end of the world if you won 4-0 against Norwich, and likewise if you lost 2-0 against Norwich. Which, going back to my whole argument about pre-season, I just don't care what happens in pre-season. I don't stand any stead by the only thing that's ever happened in pre-season that has had a huge effect on Newcastle United in the last 25 years is who getting an injury at Everton back in the day. I mean, that was and Soles was on his way to Tottenham the next day. So I mean, that was the only real catastrophe come incident of any note that's ever happened to my mind pre-season while I've been involved in Newcastle.
Blue Moon Boy says, have you ever considered writing a book, Mick, about your stories?
Yeah, I have. And a lot of people have sort of said, in fact, I was out in York this week with three good old friends, Ian Dennis from 5 Live, Alistair Yeomans, a very good producer on 5 Live, and Colin Young, who worked the patch and still works the patch for The Sun and the Daily Mail. And we talked about stories. We were like 4 grumpy old men in a boozers in York talking about, and invariably Newcastle and the European trips, and some hell-raising stories came up. But yeah, there is a part of me that thinks I would. I don't know whether I would like to write one. It's whether I think I've got one. I think I've got one in me, but whether I've got the patience and the determination to sit down and do it, I don't know. But yeah, it has crossed my mind. But the memories are still there, and they're very fond.
Great picture, Mick. I'm picking it up off your Facebook.
There we were on the bridge across the river in York. Yeah, Ian Dennis, as you look at it, is the far right or far left. Colin Young the other side, and Alistair Yeomans next to me in the middle. Great lad.
Youngie's rocking a bit of Rod Stewart there, isn't he?
I tell you, he looked well, Youngie, actually. Yeah. And he dragged us round these old haunts in York because he started off as a cub reporter in York. Alistair knows York. I was there. To be honest with you, I'd never been to York. And actually, I think I amazed them by saying, it's one of the very, very few grounds I've never been to. Bootham Crescent, I never went. I don't know why.
Well, the new ground's bizarre because
I've never been to the old one. Never mind the new one.
To get into the away end, we had to walk through a hospital ward, and then past the swimming baths, and then into the turnstiles.
Was it?
It was. It was. Absolutely bizarre. Mick, we've had a lot of requests from the supporters asking if we could get you on a more regular basis. I'd love to. So if you're up for it, it'd be good to get you on. We'll just keep in touch week to week and see when you're available. And if you're up for it, because I think people love to hear from you, Mick.
Steve, just ring me. If I can't do anything for Newcastle United fans, then I am a poorer man for it. For everything they did for me and for what that football club did for me for 25 years, if I can't go out of my way for an hour a week or an hour every 3 days, believe me, I would be neglecting my duties to them as a people, to them as a nation. So yeah, just ask away. It's not a problem.
Great stuff, mate. Great stuff. And we'll leave you with Andy Gibson with painting a wonderful thought. He says, the new away strip's nice. It just needs to find matching stockings and suspenders. Get yourself out, Andy. The Metro Centre's open, lad.
Yeah. It is available in all good stores and Ann Summers, I'm told.
On that note, have a good weekend, mate. Nice to speak to you. Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
been talking to myself again, but it's the only